This is the last job that we are ever gonna pull. Before the year is out, we are gonna be harvesting mangoes in Tahiti. Farmers. But we need seed capital, and we need to leave. You know it. I know it.
Forgive me if I can't think too much about the mango harvest.
This is it. Trust me. Arthur.
If it's business, well, business is business.
Angelo Bronte stands between us and our future.
You'll damn us all.
In Greek mythology, there's a king who was condemned for all eternity to push a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down each time it neared the top. His name was Sisyphus, and his punishment wasn't the labor, it was understanding the complete futility of his struggle. In the American West, another man lived a similar fate. A man who pushed a boulder made of ideals, of freedom, of a promised paradise, only to see it crumble back down to earth with every desperate shove. This is the story of Dutch van der Linde, a visionary and a tyrant, a modern-day Sisyphus trapped in a cycle of his own making, and his struggle reveals a truth about the nature of a dream. To understand Dutch, you have to understand his boulder. It wasn't a rock, it was an idea. The idea of absolute freedom, a life lived beyond the grasp of government, law, and the slow creep of civilization. He pictured a utopia for his gang, what he called a savage utopia, where they could live by their own rules in a world that they despised. Dutch saw himself as a Robin Hood figure, taking from the rich and giving to his family of outcasts. He pulled people from the fringes of society, orphans, runaways, the forgotten, and he gave them a home. And they gave him loyalty and an unwavering faith. This is the heart of Dutch's charisma. It's why so many followed him, even as the world was closing in. He preached a gospel of defiance against a system he saw as corrupt and oppressive. He wasn't just a gang leader, he was a prophet for a dying age. The boulder he chose to push was the very spirit of the Wild West itself, a land of infinite possibility. He was a man who saw the frontier closing, and instead of accepting it, he decided to fight back. And for a while, it almost seemed like he could win. He was smart, he was brave, and he had a belief in his own vision. He thought that he could make a difference. He thought he could save those who needed saving and punish those who deserved it. This was his purpose, a story that he built for himself and his followers. But the world, much like the hill of Sisyphus, doesn't care much for the dreams of men. The philosopher Camus wrote about something called the absurd. It's that clash between our desperate need to find meaning in life and the universe's uncaring silence. Dutch lived his whole life in that silence. And as the events of Red Dead Redemption 2 unfold, that silence gets louder. The botched job in Blackwater is the first real upset. A woman is killed, a detail Dutch conveniently leaves out, and the gang flees into the mountains. From that moment on, every plan, every one last score, becomes another agonizing push of the boulder. They rob a train owned by the industrialist Leviticus Cornwall, not just for money, but to strike a blow against this engine of modern America. They drift from camp to camp, always with the promise of Tahiti just over the next hill. But that hill keeps getting steeper. The Pinkertons, agents of this encroaching world, are relentless. The gang is hunted and cornered into one desperate play after another. And with every failure, every loss, the boulder slips a little more. Dutch starts demanding loyalty not as a family bond, but as a condition for his own survival. He deflects doubt with accusations of faithlessness. When Arthur questions the escalating violence and the bodies they leave behind, Dutch doesn't respond with answers, he responds with rhetoric. He asks for more faith, because faith is all he has left. The dream is cracking, and through those cracks we see the man behind the myth, someone terrified not of death, but of being forgotten. He can't change, he can't fight gravity, but he has to keep pushing. There's a theory that Dutch's mind finally broke after the trolley crash in Saint Denis, that a blow to the head shattered what was left of his reason. But it's more likely the crash just sped up the collapse that was already in motion. The real breaking point, I believe, was the death of Hosea. Hosea was more than Dutch's oldest friend, but he functioned somewhat as Dutch's conscience. He was the voice of reason that balanced Dutch's ego. When Hosea dies, so does Dutch's restraint. The mask of the noble outlaw slips away, and all that's left is raw, paranoid ambition. This is where Dutch's path splits from this noble, absurd hero that Camus imagined. An absurd hero that sees the futility of their struggle and rebels by finding freedom in the struggle itself. They scorn their fate, and in doing so, they become free. Dutch can't do that. The collapse of his dream doesn't lead to clarity, it leads to delusion. He drowns someone in a swamp and watches as an alligator takes the body. He murders an old woman guiding them in Guarma, consumed by paranoia that she would betray them. He allies himself with Micah Bell, a man who is the walking embodiment of the soulless greed Dutch always claims to fight against. Why? Because Micah never questions the plan. He feeds the delusion. He tells Dutch exactly what he needs to hear, that failures aren't his fault, that they're caused by traitors and lack of faith. Facing a meaningless reality, Dutch builds a new one in his own mind, a sanctuary for his paranoia where he is still the king. He sacrifices, more or less, his own sons, John and Arthur, the very men that he raised, all to protect an idea that's now just a delusion. Dutch's downfall is one of the most compelling tragedies in all of gaming. What do you think was the moment that he was truly lost? Was it Hosea's death, Micah's influence, or do you think this monster was just hiding inside of him all along? Let me know your theory in the comments. In the end, Dutch stands on a cliff, a place where we've seen him before. He once jumped from one with Arthur in a leap of faith against the laws of nature. Now he stands across from John Marston, one of the sons he left to die. And in this final showdown, Dutch finally seems to understand. He says, "I can't fight my own nature. That's the paradox. When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster." He sees the cycle. He understands the futility. He knows his entire life has been a fight against an enemy that he could never beat. Time, change, nature. This is his Sisyphus moment. The instant the boulder is at the bottom of the hill and the hero finally sees the full, pointless scope of his torment. But unlike Sisyphus, who Camus asks us to imagine is happy in his struggle, Dutch finds no peace. His rebellion was corrupted by pride, by fear, and a bottomless inability to admit that he was wrong. His final act is one of resignation. He doesn't let John kill him. He tosses his pistol aside and simply just lets go, surrendering to the gravity that he fought his entire life. But his punishment isn't over. Dutch's legacy becomes the very thing that he hated. His name becomes another monster for the civilizers to hunt. The cycle continues, and his ghost haunts the world that he failed to escape. He was not condemned to push a boulder, but to become a cautionary tale. The story of a man who held a beautiful but impossible dream in his hands. He was a king who fought for freedom but built himself a prison of ideals. He was a modern Sisyphus whose hill was the American West, and whose tragedy was that even as he watched his boulder roll away one last time, he could never truly let go. Thanks for watching.